As part of my onboarding of clients, I always ask them, who is your ideal donor? Their answer is always someone who will give us money.
Exactly. A high net worth individual who hasn't yet heard of us, but is going to love us and leave $100 million in their will for us.
But also, if that's the only information that you have about your ideal donor, it's going to be way harder to go find them. Hi, I'm your host, Maria Rio. I moved to Canada as a refugee, used charitable services myself, and have been fundraising for over a decade. I love exploring ways our sector can grow, change, and make the world more equitable. The Small Nonprofit Podcast is where we do just that. I believe small nonprofits are where the most transformative work happens. But we've been set up to fail by systems that expect us to do more with less. Every week, I sit down with leaders, fundraisers, and changemakers who are doing things differently. They're building sustainable funding without compromising their values, creating power instead of dependence, and pushing back on the broken systems we've all inherited. You'll walk away with actionable strategies you can use, not just inspiration. So if you're ready to stop scrambling and start building something that lasts, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast. If you're new here, my name is Maria Rio, and I'm an expert fundraiser with almost 15 years of experience helping executive directors like you raise more funds with less stress. Today, we're going to be talking about exactly that and improving your donor communication so they're actually effective. To do that, I have the lovely Farah to talk to me about all those things. Hi, Farah.
Hi, Maria.
Could you quickly introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, everyone. I'm Farra Trompeter. I use she, her pronouns, and I am co director and a worker owner at Big Duck. We help nonprofits and mission driven organizations and charities use communications to achieve their mission. So we focus on helping organizations build strong brands, launch compelling campaigns, develop smart, prioritized plans and strategies. And we also do a lot of training and workshops to build capacity and skills. And I have been working in the field of nonprofit communications and fundraising. I've been doing that for over 30 years.
By nonprofit communications, do you mean stewardship? Do you mean fundraising or all of the above?
It's sort of all of the engagement moments. There's how do we get people to know who you are? Once people start knowing who you are, maybe they are following you on social, they're on your website, they're actually on your list. You can communicate to them in some way. How do we then make the case, get them interested in what you're doing, understand your brand, understand your work, eventually understand your impact so that they then give? Then, how do we cultivate that relationship and steward them so they continue to engage in the organization through a second gift, a higher gift, other ways of participating? We think about communications as it supports the donor life cycle, but we also do communications that support program participation, staff recruitment, all other types of goals as well.
You're saying, how can people get to hear about the nonprofit? Because that's one of the things that we always hear, like raise awareness, right? Are nonprofits struggling to do that well? And if so, what do you think are those barriers?
I've been working in this space since the 90s, so 30 years, give or take. And I think the number of communications channels, even in that time, have exploded, right? There's so much competing for everyone's attention. Like, here in the US right now, midterm elections are approaching in a few months. I cannot tell you every day how many text messages I'm getting from candidates I've never even heard of. That's just in my cell phone inbox, right? But then there's what's showing up in my email, what's showing up on social, what's the latest new app I should be paying attention to and caring about, let alone in-person conversations, the mail, the phone, TV. There's so much coming at us. And it's always been hard for organizations to figure out what they should say and where they should say it. So you've got less time, less people, less money, and more opportunity, and your job is harder. I'm sorry to say. That is what's happening.
Okay, another challenge that I hear is like, what is the ROI of comms? What's the return on investment? People think like we shouldn't post on social media because we can't get donations from there. What would you say to that?
I can't ever guarantee anybody a specific number, right? That's very hard to do. Once you certainly start working with an organization, or if you're working within your organization, you can look at your activity, generate a benchmark, or you can look at benchmarks that are created and shared from other organizations and try to extract that. So that's generally from an ROI perspective. I would say that, we often think about a ladder of engagement, the unaware to the observer, to the supporter, to the advocate. How do we move someone from don't knowing you to knowing you, to actually wanting to support you, to eventually becoming a super fan, an advocate, an ambassador, etc. And social media can play a really helpful part in that journey, can be a really important part of the equation in communicating your impact, maintaining that awareness and that mind share, building a relationship. In some cases, direct asks in social media has proven very well, often in response to a crisis or something that is highly in the news and people are paying attention to, or in your local community if things are happening. That's where they're showing up. But I think for many organizations, the best channels often for raising money have been through more traditional direct response channels like email or mail or phone or events if your organization does a lot of that. But social media can be really affirming. And again, in some cases, also very fruitful and productive. So, take a Giving Tuesday, which people have mixed feelings about. But it is a day, and there are other giving days and moments that things happen where people are going to be looking for you and might give through social. But on an everyday basis, I would not clutter a social account with asks every day.
I think it becomes like a very top of the funnel strategy, social media.
Right? And my ladder of engagement, maybe that's like in the beginning of the journey. But again, social media can be affirming as people move through that funnel or move along that ladder. It reminds that major donor, maybe that made a gift, like, oh, this is what this organization's doing. I understand their work. I understand their impact. I'm seeing why they're needed or what they're doing. So that when the fundraiser comes at me again and asks me to renew or give more, again, it's another tool that can help make the case.
I actually don't find all social media platforms to be the same level of impact either. Like something like Instagram, you can post something and then donors can engage with it, but it's very passive, I would say.
Yes.
Something like LinkedIn, I can go talk to the donor directly and send them a message and engage with them. And it seemed very, acceptable.
LinkedIn is the oldest of the more popular social media channels that people think of these days. LinkedIn's been around for over 25 years. Whereas, Instagram, I want to say is probably in the 15-year zone, give or take. Facebook, for example, wasn't made available to organizations and individuals till 2007. That's about 20 years old. But LinkedIn's been around and people use it initially as a professional place. LinkedIn is the place where we keep our contacts and we can see what's going on. But over time, it has gotten a little more personal. Like I just opened up LinkedIn earlier and someone was talking about celebrating their 60th birthday, right? LinkedIn is also a place where people are sharing, but people are more open to more professional requests and conversations, which if your organization is reaching out to them, they're more likely to expect that than if they're on Instagram to see what the latest dance craze is, follow their grandkids, whatever. And so they may be more likely to have that one-on-one conversation with you. And LinkedIn over the years has invested. They have a whole LinkedIn for nonprofits. I've seen them try to help nonprofits use that platform better.
For me, one of the main goals of social media is to put out lead generators and then collect email addresses. So as much as possible, collect email addresses directly from social media or send them to my website to then collect email addresses there. What about you?
No, I think that that is very helpful. We call that a lead magnet or a generator, right? So, for example, posting on LinkedIn or Instagram, like top 5 ways to do X, click this link. And then I have to give you my email address to get those top 5 ways or sign this petition to do X. Then I go to your website, sign the petition. You've got my email. I think that is ideal. That's what we're hoping for. But we know a lot of people are just scrolling and they're not clicking. So they're passively seeing you. Even just that passive reminder that you exist is helpful. I think when we can use social media for more direct actions, whether that is downloading a thing, signing a thing, making a gift, that's great. Sometimes there isn't that tool, or sometimes the ask is just share this thing. You watch this video, please share it so your friends see it. Because, on so many of these channels, it's all how the algorithm decides to show you what's there. I can log into Instagram. You and I could be following the same people and the same organizations. We log in, we'll see something different in our feed based on our own interactions. So these social networks are trying to serve you content they think you care about, right? Like Instagram's like, oh, these people. Let me show you their content more. So even if I follow your organization, if I haven't interacted with it, I might not ever actually see what you've posted. And that's one of the things that's harder as opposed to, okay, you've got my name, you've got my cell, you've got my email, you can send me something. And there's a better chance I'm going to see it. I may not ever see that email. I may not open the letter you send me in the mail. I may not click that link in my cell, but there's a better chance you're actually going to get to me But that doesn't mean I don't think you should be on social. It just means you have to understand how it works.
When you look at all of those ways collectively, is there a pattern that emerges of what makes good content? Is it, you know, just accessible language, or are there more things that you'd recommend?
I mean, accessible language is important. And by that, there is this sort of accessibility perspective from considering that there may be people with disabilities who are following your account. So having alt tags or descriptions, making sure to rely on other information so that the content's communicated. And then there's the actual language you use, right? Are you using plain language? Are you writing at a third grade level or a graduate school level? Are you using a lot of jargon? Sometimes, depending on your mission and your audience, jargon's okay, right? If you're an association of surgeons around a specific disease, and that is who you're communicating with, feel free to use lots of words that I definitely will have no idea what you're saying. However, if you're an organization that's trying to reach people who are living with that disease, then you want to be a little more accessible. And by that, we mean I can actually understand what you're saying. Mostly we're looking for strength based or asset framing, right? Inviting people in a more positive way, not all doom and gloom. So thinking about the tone, thinking about the content, and then also thinking about text versus images versus video, right? For example, LinkedIn recently added video to the ability of things you can post. And actually, when you post video, your content does get prioritized because they're trying to get you to engage more with video. So I think there's this sort of what you post, when you post, how it's framed. That's all important to consider. But, at the heart of it is what should we say? And that comes to audience research, which I'd love to talk a little bit about because what motivates the donors for your organization may be different than what motivates the donors for my organization. So we can't just take a one size fits all with all of this. We need to really understand our community and then apply that to our strategy.
Okay, I love that you said that. As part of my onboarding of clients for fractional fundraising or fundraising plans, I always ask them, who is your ideal donor? Their answer is always someone who will give us money.
Exactly. A high net worth individual who hasn't yet heard of us, but is going to love us and leave $100 million in their will for us. Well, that would be great. We would all love that, but that's very hard to immediately come upon.
But also, if that's the only information that you have about your ideal donor, it's going to be way harder to go find them. If you know, my ideal donor is someone who was a single mom, now they're partnered, they're in their 60s, they live in this area, they have 2 kids, like it just starts becoming way clearer as to where those people hang out online or offline. So, how do you get to know who that ideal donor is?
I think beyond, giving level and financial background, right? And then the next thing that you started getting into was demographics. I would say what we're seeing is really important is to go beyond both of those and to think about psychographics. So psychographics are people's motivations and beliefs. A person who's raising a family, who is really interested and passionate about things they can do to make sure their child has success and upward mobility. And they're really interested in stories and communication about people like them who've been able to, accomplish upward mobility and generational wealth. So what we have found is that when you can really better understand what motivates people, what values they hold as it connects to your organization, and then tap into that in your communications, in your channels, in your content, then you actually will get better results. So to understand that, a lot of what we do is employ primary research, interviews, surveying, looking at maybe other organizations that we know your donors support to get a sense of like how they're communicating and what's coming through in their content, right? Because if a donor supports my organization, they probably might support a few other groups like mine. So what can I tell from that? Let's see what we can learn. And then we often create donor profiles to summarize what do we know about this audience generally? What are their motivations? What kind of material are they more likely to read? Are they more likely to read the New Yorker or the Atlantic? Where's the content that they're getting? We use that information for where we should be and try to emphasize, as well as what we should say no to and pull back from. So we love getting some insights from as many donors as we can, and then using that to extract ideas. And then ideally saying, when you're talking to donors that fit this profile, here's what you should emphasize and or avoid. So for example, a few years ago, We worked for a group called the Humane League, which works on, preventing cruelty and abuse toward animals. We found there were the ardent animal lovers, people who cared about their work because, like me, they have cats and like fuzzy things. There were the people who were passionate vegans who cared about that work because they've made personal lifestyle change. There are people who are really upset about how corporations might treat animals, particularly in the food industry, and are looking for justice around that. And that's the angle and the things they want to see. Now, on an Instagram account, you can't necessarily segment in that way your post, but you can imagine maybe this week we're going to emphasize or this day of the week we're going to know we're speaking to this audience, right? You can think about it that way. But when you are communicating in a more one-to-one way, you can create some segments and you can do variations of messages that highlight certain things or put things in a certain order based on we know what the person cares about.
How important do you think it is to know those segments, those ideal donor profiles before you create content?
You and I, as consultants, can paint a picture of a perfect world and what you should do. And then there is the reality of life. Knowing this before you do content, great. That is the ideal. That said, not everyone can. Sometimes you just have to use informal information and try some things. Like, I think my donors care about A and B. I'm going to talk about A today and B tomorrow and see what gets a response. Sometimes you have to just go with that until you can do the research or get the data.
Okay, one more question. For executive directors that are listening to this episode, they maybe are overwhelmed and they're like, I have no idea where to start. We don't have an email list. We don't have social media. We have a website. Or maybe they're like, no, we have an email list. We have a website, but I don't know if it's being successful. What are some actionable takeaways that you would want them to take away from this episode?
I think it's always good to do an audit of what you're currently doing to understand the strengths and the gaps. One of the things I often do with organizations is, make a donation, sign up on the email list. Sometimes I have done that and I don't get an auto response, or I get a response from someone who no longer works at the organization, who set up the email list 10 years ago, right? So actually test how you're communicating. Imagine you are a potential donor, or even better, sit next to a friend, a partner, a spouse, have them like literally next to you on the laptop, ask them, hey, sign up for our email list, make a donation, sort of like user testing you do for websites. What happens, right? If a potential donor was to find us, what's their experience? What are the other places that we're asking to give? And what's the experience like there? If we are asking on social, make a donation. If we're asking by mail, make a donation. Test your own asks and see how they are. Test them yourself, or even better, and test them with an email address that's not your work email. See what kind of updated information you get. And then also do that. I call it being a secret shopper. Do that with those peer organizations that are like yours and make a $5 donation. See what kind of response comes through and how they communicate with you. Early in my career, I worked in direct mail and telemarketing or telefundraising. And one of the things they had us do was we would give a test gift to the organization, but then I changed my last name to incorporate the organization that I was supporting. And then I can see where my gift went, right? What's the follow-up message? Are other people sending me mail now? Where did my name go? Then I think talking to some current people who support you, asking them questions like, why do you support us? What is it about our work that motivates you? Who else do you support? Where can we communicate to make sure you know what we're working on? Don't ask people, can I email you more? Which of our channels are best? Learn more about where they're passionate. Ask questions like, what do you typically do when you get our emails? Do you ever get them? Do you ignore them? Do you click on them? Do you read them? Do you forward them? Like, try to get a sense more of interaction than asking general open-ended questions. So those are just a few things.
Okay, well, if people want to continue the conversation with you, how can they find you?
I would love to continue the conversation. First, I would invite you to go to bigduck.com, where you can get lots of information and resources. We are chock full of blogs, ebooks, videos, etc. We put out a new blog at least once a month. We publish a podcast called the Smart Communications Podcast that comes out every 2 weeks. And those are all on our website, as well as some of the case studies I was mentioning. You could email me directly. It's just Farra, Farra, at bigduck.com. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. I believe I'm the only Farra Trompeter out there. Or if you go to linkedin.com/in/Farra, you will find me.
Nice. Thanks so much for coming here, sharing your energy and all your insights. And those really are great actionable tips. So I hope people do them.
No, it's truly my pleasure. Thank you for having me be here. And I hope everyone is able to put some of these ideas into practice.
So I will have all those links down in the show notes. But thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast. Really start leading with why getting those donors in through the door with those communications is so important. It just makes better donor relationships. They stick around longer. So take those tips and apply them for sure. As always, if you would like to see our lovely faces, you can watch this episode on YouTube. We upload every single episode there, so you're always caught up. Please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe there, and to leave a review of the Small Nonprofit Podcast on Apple Podcasts. That really helps out the show. But that's it for today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. We will see you here next week. Until then, bye for now. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Small Nonprofit. If you want to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with our guests directly or find me on LinkedIn. Let's keep moving money to mission and prioritizing our well-being. Bye for now.